Trung shivered slightly, pulling his thick coat tighter around him. The biting cold of Hà Giang in the final days of the year seeped through every layer of fabric, chilling him to the bone. As a freelance photographer with a free spirit and a passion for uncovering the unknown, Trung always sought out untouched beauty and hidden stories in remote corners of the world. He stood on the narrow balcony of his rented homestay, eyes scanning the distance. In front of him stretched a sea of white, fluffy clouds blanketing the jagged peaks of the limestone mountains. The wind howled through the cracks in the door, carrying with it the damp scent of earth and stone, unique to the highlands. This trip to Hà Giang was originally meant to capture a photo series on the daily life of ethnic minorities. But deep down, Trung had another motive. He'd heard whispers, mysterious tales and strange rumors about an ancient village hidden deep within a valley. A place where time seemed to stand still. And strange, spiritual things were said to linger. "Trung, your coffee's ready," Lin's voice called from behind. She was both Trung's travel companion and his assistant, energetic and full of enthusiasm. Lin never hesitated to follow Trung into every hidden corner. She placed the steaming mug on the table and gave him a small smile. "You're out here admiring the view again? With fog this thick, there's barely anything to see." Trung turned, taking the warm mug in his hands. The heat helped chase away a bit of the chill. "I love this feeling." Lin, standing here between sky and earth, soaking in the silence and the mystery of the mountains. "You know, I heard there's a very unique old village around here. It's called Village of Mist." Lin raised an eyebrow. "Village of Mist? Never heard of it. What's so special about it?" Trung nodded. "They say the place is shrouded in fog all year round, and there are strange stories about spirits dwelling there. Some even mention an ancient charm said to connect the living to the afterlife." His eyes sparkled with excitement. Lin shuddered. "More ghost stories? Aren't you scared? Just hearing that gives me goosebumps." She pulled her scarf tighter around her neck. Trung laughed. "Scared of what? You've got me here. Besides, think of the one-of-a-kind photos we could get. Don't you want some truly unforgettable shots?" He tried to convince her. Lin hesitated. She knew Trung's passion for his work, and once he set a goal, he rarely backed down. And though their adventures often got spooky, they always left unforgettable memories. "All right, I'll go, but you'd better not pull any scare pranks on me," she said, half reluctantly. Trung beamed. "Awesome, we'll leave tomorrow. I've already mapped the route. We'll have to hike quite a bit, through the forest and mountains." The next morning, before the sun had risen, Trung and Lin were ready, their gear packed, personal supplies and food in tow. The Hà Giang chill still cloaked everything, and the dense fog made it hard to see far ahead. "Trung, are you sure we're on the right path?" Lin asked nervously. The trail was narrow and slippery, with steep cliffs on either side. Trung checked the map on his phone and nodded. "Don't worry, I double-checked everything. We just follow this path straight ahead." They hiked through the forest, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Birds chirped, a nearby stream babbled gently, and the wind rustled through the trees, creating a forest symphony. After several hours, they started feeling the exhaustion. Trung paused, glancing around. The fog hadn't lifted, and ancient trees towered above, obscuring everything else. "Let's take a break," Trung said, sitting on a large rock. Lin collapsed beside him, breathing heavily. "I'm exhausted. How much longer do we have?" Trung looked at the map again. "Looks like we're halfway there. Just a bit more." As they rested, Trung suddenly heard something, a faint rustling from the bushes. It was subtle, like leaves brushing against each other, but enough to make him tense. He looked toward the sound. Alert. "Who's there?" No reply, only the wind whispering through the leaves. Trung stood up, slowly approaching the bushes. Lin whispered, "Be careful." Trung. He nodded and parted the branches. What he saw startled him, a small, abandoned shrine, built from stone, covered in moss. A massive banyan tree grew beside it, its roots clutching the rocky earth. A chill ran down Trung's spine. The shrine radiated a strange, ancient presence. "An old shrine," Trung exclaimed, excitement rising in his voice. "There has to be something special here." Lin stepped beside him, hesitant. I don't know. This place gives me the creeps. Maybe we shouldn't go in? But Trung was already walking toward it. Come on, we're here already. It'd be a waste not to explore. They entered the shrine's courtyard. The air grew colder, and the faint scent of old incense lingered. Inside, the altar had collapsed. The Buddha statues shattered. On the walls were strange red ink symbols. Faded with time, symbols Trung had never seen before. He walked carefully around, eyes scanning every detail. Near the altar, something on the ground caught his eye, a decaying wooden box. Trung picked it up. It was light, but something was inside. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was a small, black charm made from a scrap of ancient fabric. The same strange red symbols were stitched onto it. Though torn, its shape was still recognizable. A cold shiver coursed through Trung's body. This charm, it looked exactly like the ones from the legends of the Village of Mist. Trung, don't touch it, Lin said nervously. But Trung couldn't resist. Something urged him to touch the charm. He slowly reached out and made contact. Instantly, a freezing jolt shot through his hand. Pain surged as if something gripped him tightly. Trung yanked his hand back in shock, and the charm dropped to the floor with a soft thud. A freezing gust of wind blew through the shrine. Every candle went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. What's happening? Lin shrieked. Trung's heart pounded. He fumbled for his phone's flashlight, no signal. Then, in the blackness, came a sound, a laugh. A high-pitched, eerie laugh, like something from the depths of hell. Who's there? Trung stammered. The laugh grew louder, closer, right next to them. Then a raspy whisper echoed through the room. You have awakened me. Trung's blood ran cold. He knew he'd made a terrible mistake. The stories about Village of Mist, the dangerous journey, they had led him to a place he should never have entered. This shrine was more than a relic, it was home to something dark. You have awakened me? The voice repeated, and Trung felt paralyzed. The thick darkness, the piercing laugh, it froze his senses. The air felt deathly cold, reeking of mildew and decay. What is this place? Lin screamed, gripping Trung's hand tightly. He felt her trembling with fear. Trung tried to stay calm. Lin, we need to get out. Now. His voice was firm, though his whole body shook. But, it's too dark. I can't see anything. Lin sobbed, tears running down her cheeks. Trung reached around blindly, his hand touching something cold and slimy. He recoiled. What the hell is that? It's freezing. The laughter echoed again, this time even closer. Then a loud crash at the shrine's entrance. Something had fallen. They instinctively clung to each other. Trung tried his phone again. This time, the flashlight flickered on. The weak light revealed chaos. The altar had collapsed further. The statues were in worse shape, and the red ink symbols had grown darker. The charm still lay on the floor, now pulsing with a visible chill. Let's go, Trung ordered, stepping out first. They hurried, every step cautious. The trail out seemed longer than before. Every creaking floorboard, every gust of wind made them flinch. As they passed the giant banyan tree, Trung suddenly felt eyes on him. He turned, and in the faint beam of his flashlight, a white figure darted behind the tree. It lasted only a second, but enough to make Trung's skin crawl. He rubbed his eyes, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. Did you see something, Trung? Lin asked as she noticed him suddenly stop. Trung shook his head. No, nothing. Let's keep going, he replied. They continued walking, but the unsettling feeling of being watched clung tightly to Trung. He could sense a cold energy enveloping him, like something whispering unintelligible words right into his ears. Eventually, they emerged onto the familiar dirt path. Though the daylight was still dim through the mist, it brought a slight comfort, pushing back the fear lingering in their hearts. Oh my God, we finally made it out. Lin sighed in relief and collapsed onto a nearby rock. Trung looked back toward the shrine, his eyes filled with unease. This isn't just some random occurrence. That charm, it's been disturbed. He looked down at his palm. The icy sensation still lingered faintly. He didn't know what to do with it. Throwing it away felt risky, but keeping it made him anxious. So what do we do now? Trung asked Lin, his voice filled with concern. Lin thought for a moment, then said, "We need to go back to the homestay first. Then we'll figure things out from there." They both agreed to leave the shrine immediately. The hike back along the forest path was silent. The air between them felt heavy, so different from the excited energy they had started the day with. On the way back, Trung felt a strange exhaustion creep over him. His head throbbed, and a heavy weight seemed to settle on his shoulders. He knew the charm had something to do with it. By the time they returned to the homestay, it was already getting dark. The once cozy room now felt eerily different. Trung had the strong sense that someone, or something, was inside. Even though he knew they were alone, he turned on the light. The dim yellow glow pushed back the darkness just a little, but couldn't chase away the growing unease in his chest. He headed to the bathroom, hoping a warm shower would wash away the feeling. But as he stepped out, a soft sound caught his ear, from the direction of his backpack. A faint rustling noise, like fabric being moved. Trung turned to look. The backpack was still there, but it wasn't in the same spot anymore. It had shifted, as if someone had just touched it. A chill shot down his spine. He knew this wasn't his imagination. Something had followed him back. He sat on the bed, trying to calm himself. "It's just stress," he told himself. But then, another sound. This time, a gentle tapping, coming from the window. Trung held his breath and stared. No one was there, only darkness outside, and the wind rustling the trees. The tapping came again, slightly louder this time. Trung's heart pounded. He knew something wasn't right. Slowly, he approached the window and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, nothing. Just an empty road and a few faint streetlights flickering through the mist. He let out a shaky sigh. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. He lay back on the bed, trying to sleep, but then, a whisper, soft and sinister, slithered into his ear. "You cannot escape me." Trung jolted upright, heart racing. That voice. It was the same one he'd heard in the abandoned shrine. He scanned the room, eyes wide, but saw no one. He flipped on every light in the room, flooding it with brightness, trying to force out the shadows and the fear. Trung now knew that visit to the shrine hadn't just been an adventure. It had opened a door to another world, one he hadn't even believed existed. And now, he was caught in it. He glanced at his backpack. He knew the charm was still inside. And somehow, it was glowing faintly, like it was calling to him. Trung felt the pull again, the urge to touch it, to understand it, but he pulled his hand away. He knew life would never be the same. That curse-bound charm had started to haunt him. "You cannot escape me," the cold whisper echoed in Trung's ears, snapping him upright in bed. The tiny room suddenly felt suffocating. The soft yellow light from the bulb wasn't enough to push away the thick darkness closing in on his mind. He darted his eyes around, desperate to find any sign of a presence. But there was nothing, only silence. And the pounding of his heart. He tried to breathe deeply, convincing himself this was just fatigue. But the chills wouldn't let go. He stepped out of bed, his bare feet meeting the icy floor tiles. He approached his backpack. He knew the charm was inside. Even though he couldn't see it, he felt it glowing, emitting a strange, haunting energy. The symbol seemed to dance before his eyes. As if alive, Trung was drawn to it again. The urge nearly overwhelming, but fear held him back. The next morning, Trung woke with dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept a single minute. The images of the shrine, the high-pitched laughter, the haunting voice, the cursed charm, they looped endlessly in his mind. His chest felt heavy, as though a giant stone pressed against it. He picked up his phone, thinking of calling someone, but stopped. Who could I even tell? Instead, he forced himself to get dressed and head to breakfast, trying to blend into normal life, hoping to escape the nightmare. At the cafe, Lin was already waiting. She looked at him with deep concern. "Trung, are you okay? I didn't sleep well at all last night. I kept feeling cold, like something was brushing against me." Her voice was tired. Trung sighed. "Me too, Lin. I think something strange is going on." Lin frowned. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then told her about the knocks on the window, the whispering, and the backpack that moved. Lin listened intently. Her face went pale. "Oh my God. Trung, are you serious?" she whispered, voice trembling. "You mean, that thing followed us back?" Trung nodded. "I think so. And I don't know what to do." Lin thought for a moment, then said, "We need to learn more about the charm. Maybe it's the key to all of this." Trung looked at her, eyes filled with worry. "But how? We don't know anything about it." Lin replied, "I remember reading online once. There's an old man living deep in Hà Giang. They say he knows a lot about ancient charms and spiritual things from the local tribes. Maybe he can help." A spark of hope lit in Trung's chest. "Do you know where to find him?" Lin shook her head. "Only that he lives in a far-off village up in the mountains. But maybe the locals can help." Trung nodded. "Then let's go. We don't have any other option." After breakfast, they asked around town about the mysterious elder. Most people were hesitant to speak. But eventually, an older woman gave them directions. "He lives in Mist Village," she whispered. "The road there is dangerous. Fog covers it all year. Not many dare to go." Trung thanked her. Then he and Lin set off again. The path to Mist Village was far rougher than the one to the shrine. Steep cliffs flanked them, and the fog was thicker than ever. Trung's heart was heavy with worry. He didn't know if the old man could help, or if the spirit would ever let him go. They hiked in silence. Birds sang faintly. A stream gurgled somewhere nearby, and the wind rustled through leaves, creating a symphony of the forest. After hours of hiking, they grew tired. Trung stopped and looked around. Fog still blocked their view. Giant ancient trees loomed in every direction. "Let's rest," he said, sitting on a large stone. Lin sat beside him, panting. "I'm exhausted. How much farther is it?" Trung checked his phone, but the signal was gone. A deep unease settled in his chest. "I think we're lost," he admitted quietly. Lin's face went pale. "Lost? What do we do now?" Suddenly, a faint sound came from the bushes, like rustling leaves, barely audible, but enough to startle them. Trung turned toward the sound. Alert! "Who's there?" No answer. Only the wind. He stood and slowly walked toward the bush. Lin whispered, "Be careful, Trung." He nodded and pushed the branches aside. What he saw surprised him, a narrow, hidden path leading deeper into the woods. It wasn't on any map. A chill ran down his spine. The path radiated mystery. A strange trail. Trung murmured, "I wonder where it leads." Lin stepped up beside him, peering into the foggy path. "I have a bad feeling. Maybe we should go back." Trung paused for a moment. He knew this path could be dangerous, but he also knew it might be their only chance of finding Mist Village. "Let's go," Trung said firmly. "We don't have another choice." They stepped onto the narrow trail, their every step cautious. The path twisted deeper into the forest. Dense fog swallowed everything around them, limiting their vision to just a few feet ahead. The farther they walked, the colder the air became. A strange scent lingered, like the wilted perfume of jasmine flowers. Trung felt a weight pressing down on his chest, as if something invisible was trying to pull him into the earth. Suddenly, he felt an icy hand touch his shoulder. He spun around in shock, but no one was there. Only a soft whisper in his ear. "You have arrived?" A chill froze Trung's veins. He knew it. The spirit was still here, still watching him, and it was waiting at the end of the path. That whisper, "You have arrived," echoed in his mind, making each step heavier. The fog was so thick that Trung and Lin could barely see each other. And the scent of wilted jasmine grew stronger, like an eerie invitation. "Trung, I'm scared," Lin whimpered, clutching his hand. Her fingers were ice cold, trembling uncontrollably. "It feels like someone's following us." Trung took a deep breath. "Hang in there, Lin, we're close. I believe this path leads to Mist Village." His voice tried to sound confident, even though fear was clawing at him inside. They kept walking, each step deliberate. The path narrowed, and thick bushes lined either side, their branches intertwining into a dark tunnel. No sunlight made it through the dense canopy and fog, plunging them into a cold, shadowy world. Suddenly, a strange sound came from ahead, soft footsteps. Almost silent, but enough to make both of them freeze. "Who's there?" Trung called. his voice trembling. No answer. Just the wind brushing through the leaves and the thudding of their hearts. Then, a shadow flickered ahead, just a blur. Barely visible, gone in an instant. Trung rubbed his eyes, trying to focus, but there was nothing. Did you see that? Lin asked, her voice shaky. Trung shook his head. I'm not sure. Maybe it was just my imagination. He tried to reassure her, but he didn't believe it himself. They continued walking, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Trung felt someone behind him, close, almost breathing down his neck. And each time he turned around, he caught a glimpse of a shadow slipping out of view. Eventually, the trail opened into a clearing. Before them lay a small village, hidden deep within the fog. Wooden houses stood close together, old and weathered. Thin trails of smoke curled lazily into the air. Mist village, Lin cried with relief. We made it. Trung exhaled deeply. They had made it through the forest. But he knew, this was only the beginning. They stepped into the village. It was silent, not a single soul in sight. The wooden houses looked abandoned, and the air carried a strange scent, damp soil and rotting wood. They walked slowly down the main path, looking for the old shaman the locals had mentioned. They passed shuttered windows, narrow alleys, and wildflower gardens long untended. Finally, at the far end of the village, they found a small house. A bamboo fence surrounded it, and a small garden bloomed with fragrant flowers. The scent of burning incense lingered in the air, familiar and soothing. This is it, Trung said, stepping through the gate. An elderly woman sat on the porch, knitting. Her silver hair framed a kind face, but her eyes were deep, ancient, as though they could see through souls. Hello, ma'am, Trung said respectfully. We came here to ask for your help. The old woman looked up, staring straight into Trung's eyes. Her gaze was piercing, cutting through him like a blade. A chill ran down his spine. I know why you're here, she said, her voice calm yet haunting. You've awakened something that should have stayed asleep. Trung's heart pounded. She knew everything. Please, help me, he pleaded, voice shaking. I'm being haunted. I can't escape it. She studied him quietly, then sighed. The mark on you is strong. That spirit has no intention of letting you go. Despair washed over Trung. So, there's no way to stop this? The old woman shook her head slowly. It's not impossible, but you'll have to agree to a condition. Trung leaned forward desperately. What condition? I'll do anything. The elderly woman looked at Trung, her eyes filled with contemplation. You must face your greatest fear. You must enter the spirit world, and sever the bond yourself. Trung felt the blood in his body turn to ice. Enter the spirit world? What did that even mean? But, how am I supposed to do that? Trung asked, his voice trembling. The old woman smiled, a mysterious, knowing smile. I will guide you, but you must face it on your own. Do you dare? Trung glanced at Lin. She looked at him with worry in her eyes, but said nothing. She knew Trung was about to make a difficult choice. He took a deep breath. I dare, he said firmly. The woman nodded slowly. Good, then tonight, we begin. A shiver ran down Trung's spine. He knew a new journey, one far more dangerous, was about to begin. And he wasn't sure if he would come back. As night fell, Mist Village slipped into complete silence. The fog thickened more than ever, cloaking everything in an otherworldly haze. Trung and Lin were led by the old woman into a small room at the back of her home. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering oil lamp. The smell of burning incense filled the air, intense, sacred, and haunting. Sit, the old woman said, pointing to an old mat laid out on the wooden floor. Trung and Lin sat down, their nerves tense. Trung glanced at Lin. She held his hand tightly, her eyes wide with fear. The old woman sat across from Trung, staring deep into his eyes. Are you ready? She asked, her voice low and steady. Trung drew in a long breath. Yes, ma'am, I'm ready. She nodded and pulled out a small clay bowl. She poured clear water into it and dropped in a few dried jasmine petals. Then, she began chanting in an ancient language Trung had never heard before. Her voice was steady and rhythmic, yet strangely magnetic. It felt like it was pulling him into another realm. As the chant continued, The petals began to swirl on their own, and the surface of the water slowly turned cloudy. As if a mist was rising from within, a sharp chill ran down Trung's back, and his head began to buzz. "Look into the bowl," the woman said, her voice deep and calm. "You will see the path to the spirit world." Trung peered into the water. At first, all he saw was fog. But slowly, the mist cleared, and an image began to form. A narrow, winding path between towering ancient trees, leading to a crumbling shrine. That shrine, the very one where Trung and Lin had found the charm. Trung's heart pounded. He knew this was where he had to go. "Follow that path," the woman said. "You will meet the spirit there. You must face it, and sever the bond yourself." Trung turned to Lin. She met his gaze with silent worry. But she didn't speak. She knew he had to do this alone. I can do this," Trung whispered, his voice shaking but full of resolve. The old woman nodded. She reached out and gently touched his forehead. A jolt of icy energy shot through his body, making him shiver. Then, Trung felt his consciousness fading, pulled downward into darkness. He was slipping into the void. Trung felt his consciousness slipping away. He was falling into a darkness so thick. No light, no sound. It was as if he were plummeting into a bottomless void, with no end in sight. The cold wrapped around him like a shroud, paralyzing every inch of his body. When Trung opened his eyes, he found himself standing in a place that felt both familiar and strange. Towering ancient trees surrounded him, and a heavy mist blanketed everything. The air was freezing, and something weighed down on his chest, tightening with every breath. He knew he had entered the spirit world. Ahead of him lay a narrow path winding through the trees. It led straight to a crumbling, time-worn shrine, the same shrine where he and Lin had found the charm. But now, it looked even more terrifying. The moss-covered walls had darkened to a deep black, and the shattered windows looked like hollow eye sockets. Staring straight at him, a suffocating sense of dread hung in the air, making it hard to breathe. Taking a deep breath, Trung stepped through the rusted iron gate into the shrine's courtyard. Overgrown weeds brushed his legs, and the air turned colder still. His footsteps echoed unnervingly through the silence, each one like a blade cutting into the stillness. As he neared the shrine's entrance, a loud creak echoed from within, like a door slowly opening. Trung knew the spirit was waiting. He stepped inside. Darkness engulfed the room, the damp air reeking of rotting wood and wet earth. But this time, a new smell mixed in, a strong, almost sickly scent of wilted jasmine, overlaid by something metallic and foul. Trung tried to turn on his phone's flashlight, but it wouldn't work. Total darkness. "You have come?" The raspy whisper returned, louder now, as if spoken directly into his ear. Trung turned quickly. In the shadows, a dark figure slowly emerged from the corner of the room. It moved, drifting toward him. "What do you want from me?" Trung asked, his voice shaky but firm. The figure didn't answer. It just stood there, still as stone. Then a shrill, high-pitched laugh pierced the silence, not a whisper this time, but a full-blown echo that made his ears ring. "You woke me," the voice hissed, filled with hatred. "Now you must pay." A rush of freezing wind blasted through the room, like 1,000 icy needles piercing his skin. A cold hand touched his shoulder. He whipped around. But again, there was no one, just a whisper. "You cannot escape me." He tried to move, but couldn't. It was as if some invisible force pinned him in place, crushing the air from his lungs. "Let me go," Trung shouted, fighting against the force. Then suddenly, a vision flashed through his mind. A woman, long black hair hanging over her face. Her expression twisted in pain. She stood before a grave, clutching a small charm, the exact same charm Trung had touched. He gasped. The charm. It was the key. "Is that what you want?" Trung asked, voice trembling. "The charm?" The shadow didn't answer. Then came the voice again, hoarse and mournful. "You took everything from me." Trung understood. The spirit didn't just want vengeance, it wanted something back. That charm, it was part of her. Or perhaps, it had sealed her away. With trembling hands, Trung reached into his pocket. The charm was still there, icy cold and heavy. "I'll give it back," Trung said, more steadily now. But you have to let me go. The shadow hesitated. Then, it slowly began to recede. The crushing weight on Trung's chest lifted. He collapsed to the ground, coughing and gasping for breath. Looking down at the charm in his hand, it no longer glowed. Trung stood, unsteady but determined. He walked toward the broken altar and knelt before the faded wall. Strange symbols were faintly glowing now, just enough to be seen. Holding the charm tightly, Trung looked back at the shadow. It remained motionless. Do you want this? He asked softly. The shadow moved again, approaching slowly. A hand reached out, touching the charm. In that instant, a blinding light burst from the charm, flooding the room. The darkness vanished, and within the light, the woman appeared. Her hair still long, but her face now calm. She smiled, a soft, peaceful smile. Thank you, the voice whispered again. But this time, it carried no hatred, only gratitude. I am free? Her image slowly dissolved into the light, and the light faded. Darkness returned, but this time, it was just night. Trung stood there, alone, but the weight on his heart had lifted. The spirit was gone, and he had set her free. He looked at the charm in his hand. It no longer pulsed or glowed. It was now just an object, a relic of a journey into the unknown. A reminder of a curse that had finally been broken. Then, suddenly, a sharp gust of cold wind blew past him. He turned around, heart pounding. In the shadows, another figure appeared. Smaller, faint, like a child. Trung's pulse raced. He knew this wasn't over yet. Trung's heartbeat thundered in his chest. He knew deep down, this was not the end. In the shrine's thick, suffocating darkness, a small, blurry figure began to move toward him. The air turned cold again, but not with fear. This time, there was something different. Something sorrowful. Who are you? Trung asked softly, voice trembling, not from terror, but something else. He strained to see. In the dim glow of imagination, he made out the form of a little girl, maybe 7 or 8. Her long hair hung over her face. Her white dress, tattered and old, though her eyes were hidden. Trung could feel them, staring into his. Not with rage, but with aching loneliness. And a silent, desperate plea. She didn't speak. Then came a soft sob. Barely audible, but it struck Trung's heart like a blade. It wasn't anger. It wasn't vengeance. It was the cry of a forgotten soul, abandoned and alone. A sorrow too deep for words. A wave of compassion welled up in Trung's chest. He realized this little girl wasn't an enemy. She was just a lonely soul, searching for comfort, for someone to care. Do you want to tell me something? Trung asked softly, his voice gentle, full of understanding. The girl continued to cry. Then, she slowly lifted her hand and pointed toward the corner of the room. Trung followed her gaze. In the dim light, he saw an old, decaying cradle lying abandoned on the ground. Beside it, a torn, one-eyed cloth doll, its seams frayed and faded. A sharp ache pierced Trung's heart. He understood. This girl, she was the child of the woman who had been sealed away. She had died here, in this shrine, alone. What do you want me to do? Trung asked, his voice shaking slightly, but filled with empathy. The girl said nothing. She slowly walked to the cradle, sat beside it, and held the broken doll tightly to her chest. Her sobs softened, like a breeze brushing through leaves. Trung felt a deep sorrow settle in his soul. She was all alone. She just wanted to be with her mother again, to be comforted. He took a deep breath. He knew what he had to do. He approached the girl and slowly knelt beside her. You want to be with your mother, don't you? He asked gently, voice full of comfort. The girl lifted her head, though her face remained hidden beneath her hair. Trung could see a flicker of hope in her eyes. She gave him a faint nod. Trung smiled softly, a bittersweet smile. He knew he couldn't bring her mother back into this world, but he could help her find peace. He could help her feel less alone. I'll help you, Trung said firmly. I'll help you find your mother. You won't be alone anymore. The girl looked at him, her gaze filled with quiet gratitude. Then, she slowly reached out and touched Trung's hand. A chill ran through him, but this time, it wasn't frightening. It was calming, peaceful, a silent thank you. Suddenly, an image flashed in Trung's mind, a vision. A woman with long flowing hair stood in a field of flowers. Her face serene and gentle. Beside her, a small girl was laughing, holding her mother's hand. He knew then, this was how they once were. Alive, happy, together. And now, they were reunited. Trung smiled. He had done the right thing. He stood up and looked at the little girl. She still sat quietly, clutching her old doll, but now, she was no longer crying. Though her figure was still faint, Trung could sense a smile forming on her face. "You're free now," Trung whispered. The girl nodded slowly. Then, she began to fade, like dust in the wind, leaving behind a calm, weightless silence. The room fell into complete stillness. The air felt lighter. The heavy darkness that once filled the shrine was gone. Trung stood alone in the quiet space, overcome by a powerful sense of relief. The burden he had carried, lifted. The spirits of the woman and her daughter had been set free. And he, Trung, had helped them. He looked down at the charm in his hand. It no longer glowed, no more chill, just a simple object now, a relic of a journey, and of a curse that had finally been broken. Slowly, Trung walked toward the stairs. The shrine's door creaked open by itself. Daylight spilled into the room, bathing everything in warm, golden light. The once terrifying shrine now seemed peaceful. Still old, still moss-covered, but the gloom was gone. In its place, tranquil silence. Trung stepped outside and drew in a deep breath. Birds were singing. Sunlight pierced the thinning mist, illuminating the path. He turned for one last look at the shrine. He knew this would be a memory he'd never forget. A journey into fear, a curse lifted, and a bond of friendship that had carried them through it all. Turning his back, Trung stepped onto the path leading out of the forest. Morning sunlight filtered through the leaves, scattering golden rays along the ground. The trees whispered in the wind, and birds chirped in harmony above. When Trung awoke, he found himself lying on the old mat inside the old woman's room. Lin sat beside him, her face filled with concern. "Trung, you're awake," Lin cried out in relief. "You scared me. You were unconscious for a long time." Trung looked at her, then around the room. The old woman sat across from him, smiling warmly. "You did well," she said, her voice low and calm. "You helped that spirit find peace." A deep sense of relief washed over Trung. He knew it was truly over. They thanked the old woman and left Mist Village together. The path back no longer felt frightening. The fog had cleared, and sunlight warmed the forest floor. Trung returned to his everyday life. He continued his photography, exploring new places. But he was changed. He had been through something extraordinary, something that made him wiser and more grounded. And sometimes, when he touched the charm in his pocket, he remembered the shrine, Lin, and the spirits he had helped set free. He understood then, not all ghost stories are frightening. Some carry messages of release, of gratitude, and of quiet miracles that lie beyond the eyes of the living. Trung walked down the village road, his gaze drifting toward the majestic limestone mountains ahead, where new stories waited to unfold.